it's Ivy Slater, and you're listening to Her Success Story podcast, a show where gutsy businesswomen share their success journey. Hi, this is Ivy Slater. Welcome to today's episode of Her Success Story. I am so excited to bring you a guest today, somebody who I was introduced to through mutual acquaintances, and she made massive impressions on me. Kendra Nicole is a CFO, a CEO, a wife, mother, a podcaster, influencer. She has so many titles, but truly the heart of Kendra that I have taken away with is her incredible practical approach in business, in finance, in taxes to profits, to running a business and scaling a business. That the second we started talking, I knew I wanted to have Kendra on Her Success Story. So I'm going to stop talking about you, and thanks for joining me here today.
Thank you for having me. Excuse me. I'm very, very excited for this conversation.
So tell me a little bit, how did this business start? When did you start it, and how did it start? And then I'm going to get into the why you started it.
Okay, sure. So it started back when I was in corporate. I never actually had a plan to start a business. Entrepreneurship is not like in my family or anything like that. So I graduated with a degree in finance, went off to New York to pursue finance and climb that corporate ladder. And that was my goal. And that's all that I wanted to do was get that, high floors office building with the tall windows and kick my feet up, that was the goal. And as I was working, I was about 10 years into corporate and supporting the CFO of like companies like GE. And I'd sit in on these boardroom meetings and I'd listen to how the CEO and the CFO would have dialogue, and the CEO wouldn't really make a move until they ran it by the CFO. And I loved just being a part of those conversations. Yeah. And then meanwhile, I had friends who were actually starting small businesses, and they were doing great. Like they were making all of this money, but they were not happy because their sales were maybe, $1 million, $2 million in sales a year, but they had no money, like nothing to really show for it. And so they would ask me like, can you just like help me understand how this works? And I'm like, sure, let's do it. Let me talk to your accountant and look at your numbers and see what's going on. Ivy, they did not have accountants. They didn't have accountants.
What?
And I was shocked like that.
It is so surprising. I will say one of the first things, if I speak to any person in early stage business, is who is your accountant? Who's your attorney? Do you have who else is on your advisory board?
Yes.
And they're like, oh, I'm getting to it. I'm like, until you have names, don't call me.
Yes. It's very important to have early on. And I think sometimes, folks want to vet the idea, which I completely understand, test it, see if it's actually viable. And then sometimes they're so great at what they do that the sales really start to pick up, and then they're in the weeds of focusing on managing the sales, right? And so it's like, oh, I'm just so caught up in the day-to-day that I can't even onboard some of these other
They're
folks.
not running the business. They're just, they're so in on the sales are growing, which is wonderful. But the biggest problem is they start making decisions based on, oh my God, I think I just need this right now. And they're not strategizing around that. And that's Correct. Where you and I were really chatting.
Correct. Absolutely. And so, yeah, they were, I had these colleagues and friends who were making money gross revenue wise, but not profit wise. And so when I asked to speak to their accountant, and they're like, I don't have an accountant, I was like, okay, well, let's fix that. And that's where the finance room started, was really just to kind of service their back office to get their accounting in order to be able to then help them from a finance and strategic point to grow the business. But that's literally, I did it as a side hustle for a while because I never thought it was going to be a big thing. But once I noticed that their businesses, which in turn impacted their livelihood, changed after 30 days of working together, I was like, okay, GE is going to make billions of dollars whether I come to work or not, right? So I made a shift, and I was like, okay, while I love my corporate job, this is a lot more impactful. And so here we are. So
when you started up, okay, so now let's talk, go back to that practical. it's so easy. We can guide others. Then when we start up, how do we not fall into that same rut of, oh my goodness, acquiring sales and forgetting to focus on our own profitability and our own scaling?
Mhm. It takes that strategy. It takes that slowing down to speed up, right? And I think slow down to speed up when you're in the weeds of it is like, wait, what? You want me to do what? You want me to slow
I
down?
can't do that. I'm too busy right now.
Exactly, exactly. So it is, it does take a little bit of a mindset shift, and it does take a little bit of really looking at your calendar and understanding what your priorities are. Because what tends to happen is if you don't take the time to slow down to speed up, you burn out, which
Yeah.
makes you slow down anyways. So do you want to intentionally on your time kind of slow down, or do you want it to kind of hit you like a brick and force you to slow down? So either way, you're going to slow down because it's not sustainable to run that way and at that speed.
So how long have you been doing this now? This is no longer new.
It's been about 7 years. I started about 8 years ago, and full time, I've been in it 7 years.
What was what was the huge catalyst for you in starting to scale this company?
So initially, I brought that whole corporate mindset with me when I first started, which was like, okay, if I'm going to do this full time, let's just push through. Let's grow this thing massively. Let me build out this huge team. And so for the first few years, I was just growing and growing and growing. And I mean, that's all I knew. I was putting in the same amount of hours in my business as I was in corporate. So in my mind, I'm like, just now I'm just doing it for myself. So late night sometimes, weekends sometimes, but that's what I did in corporate. And then that was my mindset. And then in 2020, obviously globally things happened, but then also in my little world is when my son was born. And yeah, changed everything.
Hello, change of life.
Yes, yes.
It is that rude awakening, change of life moment there.
Absolutely. I mean, I had thought in 2019 when I first was pregnant, I was like, okay, well, I'll create a maternity leave, and because I work for myself, I'm going to give myself like 4 months maternity leave, and uh, you know, yeah, I have a great team, but of course, I'm still the one taking the sales calls. I'm still the one onboarding clients. I'm still the one doing the monthly calls. So what am I thinking? Is this really a maternity leave? I'm still on meetings. And so I remember when my son was first born, sitting on the little bouncy ball, trying to like rock him to sleep while I'm on calls with clients. And I was just like, this does not feel sustainable either. Like, this
This
is
is
not
not
going to work.
sustainable. Something's got to change. If
Yeah.
I would, and I'll sometimes say, if I was my client, what would I be saying about this situation right now?
That's good. That's so good. Absolutely. Absolutely. In my mind, I'm thinking, okay, well, I'm just doing this because, just needs to get done. But you're absolutely right. If it was a client of mine, I would say, okay, is this really the way that you want to go about this? Are you really creating the life that you're wanting to have? And so major shifts happened there. I'd say about 2 months into that 4 month maternity leave, quote unquote, major shifts started to happen in how I thought about the business and what scaling meant to me in my life.
What have you seen? Little one is a few years old now.
Yes, yes.
What have you seen on the other side of it? What has been impactful for you?
Yeah, so really focusing in on what are my priorities, and priorities, they shift a little bit here and there, but your major like life priorities are usually pretty like foundational and rooted, right? So,
Yeah.
it's
They,
spending.
they should they should be your life priorities should be foundational. They should be rooted. You should know your values. Let's take a moment to go here. Right? We should be making decisions based on our values that are important to us, to how we want to live, and running our businesses accordingly. We've been
Absolutely.
there, people. We don't always do that.
Absolutely. And and sometimes it takes certain events to make that happen, right? Or to make you really think about that. Because of course, ahead of time, before Carter, before my son, I was like, yeah, spending time with my family, but it was just different. Now it's like, okay, wait, no, I want to be able to, if he, gets sick at school, I want to be able to just go pick him up and not have to worry about, can I actually leave my office and do those things? So the priorities definitely shifted, and so now, if on the other side, the number one thing that I kind of funnel everything through is how is this going to impact my day to day time with my family and my health? How is it going to impact that? I don't take on stressful clients now. When you're on that
Okay, hold
call.
on. Stop right there, because we need to go here for a minute. Because there's people, when I say, and I'm not going to name the people per se, kind of, sort of, but there's people who say, Ivy, you've been in business too long. You can't just decide you're really only going to work with people you like. You got to run a company. You have overhead. You have this and that. How can you do that?
Mhm.
And I will say, I have my former partner in my printing company way back. I said to him when I left, and I opened this company, we're in our whatever, a lot of years. I opened Slater Success in January of 2008. And I was out of Slater Graphics in January of 2010. It was a 2-year succession plan. And I looked at him when I left. I said, I will only work with people who I absolutely adore and align with their values, my truths.
Yes.
He goes, and you plan on making a living? I said, I know I will. So there's always questions there. Can you do this?
Yeah.
As a business owner, how can you just make that decision? How do you actually find people that you truly adore? So how have you made that transition? I know how I did it, but I want to know how you did it.
Yeah. Well, first, I love that you said that. I love that you not only felt it, but you said it and you stood in it. And,
Yeah.
and I mean, it does take like a little bit of a mindset shift, but I think that as far as the how do you find them and how does that happen? I feel like once you are set in it and you say it out loud and you hold firm to it, it happens. It
It's
happens.
shocking.
And then your people find your people. So it's also a thing of, if you think about, especially in like consulting type businesses or service-based businesses, when you do a great job with those who you are serving, which you tend to do when there is that connection there, when you do a great job for them, they tell other people and they tell other like-minded people, and so it then just rolls and rolls. When you are doing a great job for those who just don't serve you well, you're still going to do a great job for them because you're a great service provider, you're a great person. But then they're also going to start to share it with those people who are not in alignment with you. So if you put it out there that this is who I'm going to serve and why, they find you and they share with others, and it does work and it does happen. And I know, being someone who is definitely very like analytical, and like I used to always teach, because my sister's a little bit more like, I call her woo woo. I would say, that just doesn't, like, how does that actually work? Like, put it on paper, like make it make sense to me. And then she would just say sometimes, Kendra, just let it be. Just let it be. And I'm like, well, but how? Like, what's the action steps? And she's just like, let it be. And sometimes in life, you just have to believe and let it be, and you will see. And then if once you see it once, you can't unsee it. And you're like, okay, I can do this.
I am such a firm believer in the clear, concrete strategy and action steps with a little woo sprinkled in. And there's a combination there. And number one, there's that, listen, 15, 20 years ago, people didn't talk mindset.
That's a good one.
It was like, what? No. Give me okay, here's your mathematical equation. This is how you figure out percentage. This is how you figure out overhead, right? They're all the practical pieces. But when you see and allow yourself to add that piece that your sister sprinkles in a little bit of woo, that I'm a firm believer in, I will say, and I've said many times, we at Slater Success, we work with an enormous amount of people in the legal field. And I was like, then write your law. Like, what do you mean by that? It's like, well, if you're going to write down specific goals, write it as if you were writing a law unto yourself of what you will achieve and how you will live.
Yes.
Because you believe in the law in the core of your heart, right? In your core, in your gut, in your heart. So create your law. And
Mhm.
it's funny when we put that down and we start looking at it, and there's the woo sprinkle, right? We start looking at it, what actually starts happening?
Yeah. Yeah. It actually comes to fruition. And once it starts to come to fruition, like I said, you can't unsee it at that point. You can't
And I
unsee it.
love how you say that you can't unsee it, because that is so true.
Mhm. Mhm. And
So
then suddenly the woo starts to like, it's like, "Oh, okay. No, I get this now. I get this, and I feel this." And so then it's a little bit easier to, I guess, believe in even more and to follow through with even more.
right. And you know what I agree with you. What I'm hearing you say is it makes it so much easier than take the next step
Mm.
and go a little bigger.
Oh,
Play
yes.
a little bigger. Oh, if all of a sudden this, and I remember you have a 3-year-old. I'm at different points, so I'll go back like a dozen plus years when my kids were applying to schools, and I was like, I knew where, and I remember writing it down and putting it on the side of my bed exactly what they wanted and what I wanted for them.
Mhm.
And I remember we were in a tough place. It was a tough period of our lives. My daughter was applying to colleges, and
Mhm.
I wrote down she gets accepted to the college of her dreams, and we can afford to send her with, you know, and it, we can easily afford to send her,
Yes.
right? And I wrote something completely positive. I didn't say anything about stress or negativity. And I
Mm.
just wrote this statement. And my son was applying to high schools. New York City is a weird place. You apply to high schools, even when it's public schools, etc. Don't even go there. And I wrote like another statement. And I would like look at it, read it before, in the morning, and read it at night, and just look at it and glance at it. And I'm like, we got this. We got
Yeah.
this,
Yeah.
and she got accepted to 8 out of 8 schools with
Mhm.
scholarship money. And she's like, I want to go here. And we're like, okay,
Yes.
you got this. And my the same thing, my son got accepted to one of the best high schools in New York with no tuition, no nothing, that set him up for just what he wanted. And it's like, I'm 100% about the practical
Mhm.
and the action and the strategy and a little bit of woo.
Yes. Absolutely. I love
So what
that.
has surprised you? And you've been running this company for 7 years. Okay. That is a transformation. You've made it past 5 years. You're in this. This is now a long-standing business for the future.
Mhm.
What has surprised you as a leader?
What is surprise? That's a great question. I think looking now from when I first started, what has surprised me is how easy it can be. Like how easy and that how easy it can be in a sense of when you have the right team in place that support you and you support them, when you work with the clients where there is that alignment, when you stop doing anything like you can test out different ways of marketing or whatever, but if you feel friction and you feel like you don't enjoy whatever aspect that is, you stop doing it and you just double down on the things that you actually enjoy doing in your business. It doesn't have to be stressful. It doesn't have to be complicated. You don't have to do every new sparkly marketing thing that comes out and do this and work with this person and that person. It doesn't have to be that complicated. And I definitely went through phases where I thought, okay, well, I have to try the newest this and try the newest that. But once I started to really lean into if it does not feel comfortable, if it does not feel right, because it might be a little uncomfortable sometimes to
Yeah,
be.
I was going to say, I'm okay being uncomfortable because I know there's growth in uncomfortable. But if
Yeah.
something feels not in alignment, if it doesn't feel right to me, if it doesn't
Yes.
feel valued in ethics and integrity and like right in my core, and I
Right.
check in with my gut all the time on these things.
Mhm. Yes, it won't steer you wrong. It will not steer you wrong, and you're absolutely right. You'll discomfort is one thing, but when you feel that something is not right and that it's off, you don't have to do it, And so don't. And that's what's been shocking to me is just because I think I know when I first started in the first several years, I just figured, well, I have to do this. This is what's working now, so I have to do this. This is the popular thing this year, so I have to do this. And that is just uh, not easy, and not, I don't think, the right way to go.
What do you see for your, in everything you do, what do you see for the future of your business and for yourself?
It's great. Another great question, Ivy. I really just see us continuing to do what we're doing. Like, we really love supporting women-owned businesses, and we have started over these last couple of years going even deeper with clients. So where, the first few years, the focus was kind of expanding our client base. Now it's like, okay, well, we have a great core set of clients. Let's figure out how we can go deeper, which is when we started the tax division here recently over the last year. So, so yeah, it's been great, and I want to just continue going down that path. And we're growing our family, so hopefully growing our family. So we're just going to continue to ensure that that the time that I have available, and that my health and all of that is strong, so that we can do that. But I think it's scaling in a sense of it growing the business, but not necessarily in a sense of any particular, net margin growth rate or working capital growth rate. It's scaling in a sense of what feels right for my family and what feels right for my clients and my team.
So one last thing I have to ask. If you were to share forward a piece of advice or a tip, a strategy, a secret, I don't care what you want to call it, to other leaders who are growing companies, other leaders who are, and in the early stage, hunker down in your sales, and then all of a sudden, early stage is over and starting to running and scaling a company. What's one tip of advice you would say for these leaders? What should they know based on your experience?
Yeah, really good questions. So I would say that it really boils down to back to alignment. Like, I think that there's skill set, and then there's just alignment on values when it comes to the build out of your team. Skill set's obviously very, very important, but with a lot of things, not with all things, but with a lot of things, skill set can be built. Can be increased through trainings and whatnot. But alignment and values is so, so very important. My very first hire, she was actually a contractor at the time when I was still in corporate. When I got my first client, I brought her on to help out. She's still with me to this day, all these years later. She's now my accounting director. And she's grown with me and grown out my team with me over all of this time. And everyone that she brings on, because her alignment or her values are in alignment with my values and the business's core values, everyone that she's brought on has worked and has been a gem. And that has helped tremendously, because, as growing your team is hard. It's hard. Sometimes there's a lot of turnover. Sometimes there's a lot of just friction. And so if you focus on building out a team that is in alignment with your core values and with your company's core values, and you really focus there, then I think it just decreases the friction and only increases the positive trajectory of your business.
I cannot agree more. And there is a lot of work companies, especially the bigger companies that we work with, do on their core values, which is great. But make sure when you do your core values that it's truly aligned with who you are and not just what looks right out there.
Yes. Yes.
And I think that's what I'm hearing you say is that differentiator. You put so much emphasis, and this is so important, on how your core values align with your company's core values and then your people's core values. Don't forget yourself. Don't forget yourself as the leader, because it's great to have your core values, but if you don't put yourself in there, then the people that you're scaling with, and as you expand, we need great team. We want great team. That is key. I love you shared that. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you for the great question.
Kendra, how can our listeners learn more? I know you have a podcast, you have some great information out there. Share a little bit so they can tune in and learn more about you and your organization.
Yes, thank you. So the website is definitely the top place to go, which is thefinancefem.com. And on Instagram, we're at the Finance Fem as well. And then, yes, the podcast is the Kendra Nicole podcast, which I hope to have you on very soon so we can continue this
Looking
conversation.
forward to continuing the conversation on the other side as you're going to ask me some real good questions.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. So yeah, that's the best place to find us.
And how cool is it, listeners, to actually have and I will say not all, but a good majority of our listeners are women leaders. And to have a woman leading a company around Finance Fem just for us, whose values and understanding of a woman leader is in alignment. So thank you, Kendra, for doing that for all.
Thank you. Thank you. Appreciate that.
Listeners, stay tuned. We have some other great interviews coming up, some great content episodes coming up. I'm going to also invite you to do one last thing before you close this out. Take a deep breath and jot down one thing that you took away from Kendra and I's conversation. Put it down in your notes in your phone, your computer, a piece of paper, wherever. And then make a decision on the action you're going to take. I love that you guys join us, and we have a great group of listeners and followers here at Her Success Story. One of the most important things is to make sure that we're all, as a group, in action forward, making 24 a fabulous year. So to your success, and Kendra, thank you again.
Thank you.
Sure. See you next time.